Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStompMTG. So with this video, we're going to be upgrading the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, the Hosts of Mordor Precon deck. So this deck has two different options for commanders, the front-facing commander with Sauron, Lord of the Rings, and Saruman, the White Hand. And I have to be quite honest, there's two different strategies going on in this deck. One's going with the reanimator theme with Sauron, and Saruman is going with a more spellslinger theme, amassing more orcs. So out of all the decks, this was kind of the harder one to pick because you kind of really have to pick two different commanders which are doing two different strategies. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Sauron, Lord of the Rings, mainly because I love Sauron as a character, so we're going to do a deep dive into him. I did want to let you know I do have two different deck lists down below, one for Sauron, Lord of the Rings as a reanimator strategy, and Saruman the White Hand with a spellslinger orc tribal theme. So in this video, let's first discuss Sauron, Lord of the Rings. He is an 8-mana commander that is pretty expensive, however he does a lot when he enters the battlefield. When you cast this spell, amass orcs 5, mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. He does have trample, and whenever a commander an opponent control dies, the ring tempts you. So like I mentioned previously, Sauron is a huge CMC, but he's more of a game finisher when you think about it. He has trample and a 9/9 body by itself, and on top of that you make a 5/5 Orc Army at the lowest. And on top of that, if you have a big creature in the graveyard, you're just gaining more incidental value on top of that. So this version of Sauron is looking to be making a big board presence on the battlefield. Also a quick side note, this is absolutely breathtaking art. This is one of my favorite arts of the set, with Sauron looking so menacing with the lightning in the background with his sword and his eye. Aside from the side note, this is a pretty powerful commander when it goes onto the battlefield. So let's get into the deck. I first want to talk about some of the cards that are great in the precons already. There are going to be some that are reprints, but some that are absolute powerhouses that I do want to mention. So we do have a sweet new reprint with Reanimate itself, and another reanimation spell with 2 Greaterly 2 Deep. It's always great to see a reprint in Reanimate. On top of that, it isn't a precon, so it's going to be more ready and available for people to get access to. There's nothing too much to say about Reanimate. It's one of the classic all-stars in Reanimator strategies. However, I do want to touch on 2 Greaterly 2 Deep. 7 mana might seem like a lot, but you're getting a board wipe mixed in with a creature card going onto the battlefield, any kind of creature on the battlefield, whether it be one of your creatures or an opponent's creatures. And when that creature enters the battlefield, it'll deal damage equal to its power to each other creature. So 7 mana might seem like a lot, but if you do get a Balrog into play and you board wipe the whole entire board, you're going to do a lot of work. I did want to bring your attention to some of the creatures that cycle. So for example, we do have Rampaging War Mammoth, the Balrog of Moria, and also Monstrosity of the Lake. So what's really unique about cycling in Reanimator strategies is the fact that you could cycle that big creature, put it into the graveyard so that you could reanimate it later. So with the War Mammoth, you could cycle it and then you could destroy up to X target artifacts where X is the amount you paid into it. And then after cycling it, you get to draw a card on top of it. With the Balrog, you get to cycle it and then you make 2 treasure tokens ramping you ahead, and on top of that you get to draw a card as well. And with the Monstrosity of the Lake, you get island cycling where you can discard this card and then you get an island card into your hand. So again, the ability to cycle these are great value, and on top of that, these are great beaters on the battlefield as well. Mainly the Balrog of Moria, absolutely menacing, trample and haste, and has an 8/8 body. There are also some great reprints of some dragons, Scourge of the Throne and Nullspine Dragon. I know technically the Nullspine Dragon is already a cheap reprint, but honestly the art on it looks absolutely breathtaking. But think about it this way, if you have the commander on the battlefield, you swing in with Sauron, you'll deal 9 damage to somebody, then you'll draw 9 cards. When you play Nullspine Dragon, that's absolutely great value. Also, getting extra combats with Scourge of the Throne isn't too shabby either, so if we do have a big army full of beefy beaters, we could swing away for victory, and keep on swinging just in case if we haven't done enough damage. However, there's another dragon in town, and honestly my favorite card out of the whole entire precon deck. So that card is Cavern Horde Dragon. So my first thoughts about this dragon is, what was Wizards thinking about with this card? It's absolutely incredible. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. It does have flying, trample, and haste, so immediate value, and if somebody has a flying creature, you could trample over it just in case if you want to get that damage in. And when you do deal combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls, so it's not as powerful as Dockside Extortionist, but remember, it does have flying, trample, and haste. It has nice evasion, and if a flyer's on the battlefield, you could swing in, and if it's bigger, you could deal that extra damage. Also on top of that, if somebody has 7 or more treasures, this is only going to cost 2 mana for a flying, trample, haste, 6/6 body that will make more treasures. This is absolutely an insane card in my opinion, and that's why it's one of my favorite cards out of the new Precon. So those are some of the cards I do like out of the Precon. I do want to discuss some cards that you may want to consider putting in because, again, half the deck is more of a spell slinger theme. The other part of the deck is more of a reanimator theme. So because this is a reanimator theme, I first want to discuss ramp. And seriously, this deck needs all the help it could get with ramp. There's not a lot of ramp pieces in the deck, so let's consider some like the talismans, like Talisman of Creativity, Talisman of Dominance, and Talisman of Indulgence. I like my mana rocks cheaper so that you could play them early on so that you could get big creatures on the board. I did want to discuss mana rituals so that you could get creatures on the board early like Seething Song, Mana Geyser, and Dark Ritual. We don't have the help of green to get lands on the battlefield, but we do have some amazing rituals in Rakdos colors. I do think Mana Geyser is the best out of the bunch. It is an investment of 5 mana, but again, if your opponents have like 15 lands tapped, you're going to get 15 mana on the battlefield. So rituals are definitely a great piece in the deck. I did also want to discuss some removal pieces, not a whole lot. I did add a good amount in there, but these are the highlights, like a Braid. You could deal 3 damage to a target creature, or you could destroy a target artifact. Just great value overall, mainly if somebody has a big artifact on the battlefield, you could destroy it right away. On top of that, I did want to mention Go for the Throat, mainly because of the art. Golem absolutely terrified me as a kid, and this card absolutely screams nightmare fuel for me as a kid. So for 2 mana, not too bad. I also did want to discuss Hero's Downfall, mainly because you could have the versatility of destroying a target creature or planeswalker. This is a cheaper alternative to some other better spells, but I did want to include it for the versatility. I did also want to discuss the reanimator strategy, mainly some great support cards in that shell. So there's a lot of great cards to consider. The cards I did want to put in the list is Big Score, Unexpected Windfall, and Frantic Search. With Big Score and Unexpected Windfall, you could discard a card and on top of that draw 2 cards and then create 2 treasure tokens. So you do get the treasure tokens so that you could cast your commander easier. And if you do have a big creature in your hand, you could put it to the graveyard so that you could reanimate it later. I did also want to discuss Frantic Search, mainly because you get to draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and then untap up to 3 lands. So again, we want multiple ways where we could discard our cards to our graveyard so that we could reanimate them later, but why not have some great graveyard tutors like Entomb and Unmarked Grave. These provide great value if you want a specific creature into the graveyard. There's a way to do that with Entomb, but Unmarked Grave is a little bit more shallow as you have to search for a non-legendary card and put it into the graveyard. So the main reason why I do like tutors is they provide great consistency. I also did want to mention another great tutor, and this one's actually from the main set with Ring Sight. So this is a 3 mana tutor. It's a little different from your normal tutor. The ring tempts you, search your library for a card that shares a color with a legendary creature you control, reveal it, then put it into your hand, then shuffle. So a lot of people may think that they need a legendary creature on the battlefield, but if you have a normal creature on the battlefield, the ring tempts you, that actually makes a creature legendary if you make it your ring bearer. I did want to give a quick mention to this mainly because it is from the set, but there are also a lot of great reanimation spells like Persist and Animate Dead. There's actually a good amount of reanimation spells in the deck already, so I didn't need to touch on them too much, but Persist and Animate Dead are great because they're 2 mana, they return a creature to the battlefield. So I did have to give a quick mention to these cards specifically. I mean, even our commander Sauron, Lord of the Rings, also has that way of reanimating a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield as well. So let's go into that. Let's dive into some cards we do want to reanimate. We want to disturb the slumber of many creatures in the graveyard that are especially powerful. So the first card I did have to mention is the Balrog, Durin's Bane. There's another version of the Balrog. So this one has that ability. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrifice sacrifice this turn. So say for example you have 3 or 4 treasure on the battlefield and you sacrifice the 4 treasures. Because those were sacrificed and you gained mana off of the treasure, the Balrog's cost will be reduced with the sacrificed treasure, and this will be very cheap to cast. He does have haste and can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. When he does die, destroy target artifact or creature an opponent controls. So I do have to say this is very menacing. Obviously it doesn't have menacing, but this is very menacing, especially looking at the art. I also did want to discuss another great reanimator target with the Watcher of the Water. This unfortunately does enter the battlefield tapped with 9 stun counters on it, but you mainly want it for that other ability. Whenever you draw a card during the opponent's turn, you create a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token, and then whenever a tentacle you control dies, untap up to 1 target Kraken and put a stun counter on up to 1 target non-land permanent. So the flavor on this card is absolutely on point. Whenever you disturb the Watcher of the Water by destroying a tentacle creature token, it could untap itself and tap a non-land permanent opponent controls, so this is going to be providing great value overall. On top of that, having a 9/9 body is nothing to scoff at either. A lot of our looting spells are instant, so we could play them on instant speed. We could draw a couple cards and then we'll make a couple tentacle tokens, so this is going to be absolutely insane in the deck. So I did have a conundrum in the deck. I did want to make this as thematic as possible with Lord of the Rings, but there's some other great reanimation targets I just had to put into the deck. So the first cards I do want to mention are the Dinosaurs of Ixalan, mainly with Atali and Nezahal. Nezahal is absolutely going to be incredible drawing us cards. Atali is going to get us great value whenever it does attack. Each of these are doing their own thing. I mainly like Nezahal because it has a great way of protecting itself. Plus on top of that, we could discard 3 cards, putting cards into our graveyard. Again, we want a graveyard full of monsters to reanimate, so Nezahal will be a great include, but if we do want to cast them for free potentially, Atali is your guy. I do think Burning Rune Demon is absolutely a great include, mainly because you could search your library for up to 2 cards. Your opponent will choose one of them to put into the graveyard, but you'll get the other one into your hand. However, your opponent will think twice which card to put into the graveyard, because again, we are in a reanimator strategy. It will actually hinder our opponents if they put a creature into the graveyard instead of in our hand. So this card is an absolute win-win in any reanimator strategy in general. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this precon upgrade with the Hosts of Mordor. So like I did mention previously, I did make 2 different upgrades, one with Sauron Lord of the Rings, that is in this video specifically. I also did make an upgrade with Saruman the White Hand in the deck list down below if you do want to go check that out. I mainly made 2 different deck lists because they're both doing 2 different things. Sauron wants to do a reanimator theme and Saruman wants to do a spell slinger token theme. However, I do have to say I love reanimator as a strategy. I feel like I was a little more biased towards it in this video. But let me know down below, do you plan on buying this precon? Are you just buying the face commander and then just making a whole new deck? Are you also going to be upgrading the deck as well? Let me know down below in the comments again. Also make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.